time to reconnect.
Fantastic, really great. So welcome everybody to the third session in the Empower Your Creative Mind mini-series based on Steve Gilligan's work. And the first session was about accessing a generative state, a body-mind connected state, which is somatic. It has body, mind, emotion, and spirit. It's got well-being, it's got flow. And all the research says, all the research in positive psychology says that if you regularly access these body-mind states, these generative states, then you will, you'll relate better to people, you'll take risks which are just the right level of risk, not too much and not too little. You'll manage your time better. You'll be more successful. There are lots of benefits from practicing body-mind connected states, generative states. And in the broaden and build theory of positive emotion, it says that not only does the generative state feel good at the time when you sit or you walk or you move or you engage in an activity to access it, but also it has an impact on the rest of your day as well. So that just having a daily practice really makes a difference to your whole day and to your success in general. And of course, it's cumulative over time. And some people will do practices twice a day. Steve Gilligan himself does half an hour twice a day. So I really recommend really developing these sorts of inner practices. And I want to make a little separation between a psychological practice and a spiritual practice. And of course, it's great to do both, but a psychological practice is a practice where you align with yourself and you align with the feelings in your body, your emotions, your body, your mind, and perhaps also your spirit, and that you access your psychological resources, the resources that are particularly about you. And there's a bridge between psychological meditation and, if you like, spiritual meditation, which is that one of the types of psychological resource is, of course, spiritual archetypes. However you want to visualize spiritual forms or archetypal forms, of course, that's a bridge, and you can feel the resource of imagining a saint or imagining a holy figure, or Mother Earth in some archetypal form, or however you want to imagine archetypal forms. I was talking to someone the other day who uses psychological archetypal resources from Lord of the Rings, Galadriel, for example. So there's really quite a lot of freedom around that. When we talk about spiritual meditation, or contemplation would be the word that's used in Christianity, when we talk about spiritual meditation, we're generally in Buddhism and in Hinduism, we're talking about discovering the nature of mind, discovering your essential nature. And in Christianity, you lean into what they call the cloud of unknowing, waiting without any expectation, waiting for something to penetrate through the cloud of unknowing into that state of awareness. But you basically take a state of presence. So spiritual meditation is about the exploration of presence itself and awareness itself. In Buddhism, they say awareness of this present moment is the Buddha. Is the Buddha. That is the Buddha. So, so I'm just making a distinction between psychological meditation, which can be used for high performance, for helping yourself get through a meeting, through engaging your resources for an activity that you're engaged in during the course of the day, and looking at the nature of mind itself, looking at our essential nature, which is spiritual meditation. And of course, the two work can be fitted really well together, and I do both in my morning practice. So the first step is getting a generative state. And by the way, the structure of the sessions, for those of you who are new here today, is that I'll chat for a while, give you some cognitive input, and then I'll take that cognitive input into a long meditation. So I'll lead you through a meditation. Then we'll go into breakout groups, and we will discuss what we got from the meditations. And at the end, we'll have a final sharing with each other. So the first step is the generative state. The second step is knowing what your intention is. What is my intention? And it could be just to align. I'm getting up in the morning. I want to check in with myself. I want to welcome all the parts of myself. I want to align with myself. Or it could be, I want to be in this particular state today, and I'll access resources to be in this particular, in a particular state. You know, aligned with myself, for example, might be it. In the flow would be a good phrase to use. Or it might be that you're in some bigger change process, and that you've realized that to get yourself through this bigger change process, you need a lot of resources every day. And every morning you check in with those resources. As I've mentioned in the previous sessions, when Steve sees one-to-one clients, which he doesn't see very much of anymore, I have to say, but when he sees one-to-one clients, he insists that they have a daily practice. If you want to do deep change work, you can't just go to a workshop, manage to get signed up by the guru to do a demonstration, and then you're done and dusted. You may need some input from a coach, a psychotherapist, an expert, but you also, it'll be much, much more effective if you reinforce it every day, if you reinforce the practice every day. So if you're in a medium to long-term change process, you might use your daily practice to just keep bringing in your resources, bringing in your resources, bringing in resources. The third step is the topic of today, which is the nature of resources and building our psychological resources. The fourth step is that somewhere in this process, if you're thinking, oh, I think I need to meditate on this, that's probably a sign that there's something that's you're unsure of, there's some obstacle, there's something that you're not clear about, there's something that might get in your way, or there might be a sense of vulnerability or difficulty or challenge from the outside. And so is the fourth step, and it may come up earlier because actually this isn't necessarily, it's only a sequential model at the beginner level. The more advanced level, the order of the steps may change, but that then something comes up that's a feeling of difficulty or vulnerability or fear or sadness or anger or uncertainty, whatever it happens to be. And so that's next week's session. And then the week after that, we'll look at, so how do we weave the two together? How do we bring the resources to bear on the vulnerability and the difficulty? So the basic idea is that you access a body-mind state, you have an intention, and then you develop sufficient resources to handle any difficulty or inner vulnerability or inner conflict that you have, so that you can be aligned doing the activity that you're going to do during the course of the day or this period of time. I mean, that's the basic model. So today's step is about accessing resources. Next week's session is about welcoming the obstacles. And the week after is about how you weave the resources with the obstacles so that the obstacles become transformed. And that next week, we'll start to talk about how the obstacles themselves are gifts. And so just to sort of complete the model, then, so this week is accessing resources. The next week is welcoming the obstacles. The week after is weaving the resources and the obstacles. And then having done that, you then imagine, rehearse, think through, walking through the day or the week or the month, the period of time with this integration of resources, managing any difficulty or vulnerability that you have. And then the final step in the process is just to think about, how do I do this as a daily practice, so that I'm not just doing this as a one-off meditation, but at the end of it, I say, and how do I continue this tomorrow? What's my practice for tomorrow? And so, of course, this is a really deep process. Every tool you have that you've ever acquired that's psychological or spiritual can fit inside these 7 steps. So you can be free to use everything that you have already inside these 7 high-level steps. So let's talk about psychological resources. Let's talk about the different sorts of psychological resource. So for people in the psychological field, the 2 most obvious psychological resources are your memories of every moment in your life that you were in the flow, that you were happy, that you were connected and aligned in yourself, that things were going well, that you were feeling successful. So if we just took this one single resource and said, given that I own the memories in my mind, and I have an editing suite in my mind, let me go through and highlight or make a movie or bring to the forefront of my mind every experience I've ever had when I've been happy, in the flow, feeling successful, aligned, relating well, connecting well with other people. So there's a vast library of memories of you being effective and successful and happy in the world. And let's bring those to the forefront of our mind, because one of the problems with the sensitivity of being human is that we have a bad experience and we magnify it, we escalate it. And then it's very easy to remember the bad experiences and not to remember the good experiences. But actually, it's useful to review difficult experiences, to learn, to find out what we can learn from those difficult experiences. It's great to do an after action review and look at what happened and what we can learn from the process. But in terms of being confident and successful and empowered in the world, it's more useful to have access, to have the confidence that comes from remembering the positive moments of your life when you were really effective in the flow. So if you want to make something happen in the future, the easiest way to feel confident about making it happen in the future is to remember every time that you did something similar in the past, and to see that and hear that and feel that. So, the salesman's example or the saleswoman's example, before they go into a meeting with a potential new client, is to remember every time a previous client was satisfied, and to reminisce on that, to daydream on that, remember how many times they'd made a difference to someone before you go into the meeting. Because then you go into the meeting with the feeling of, oh, I'm a person who makes a difference to people. And if that's the attitude you have in your sales meeting, it's going to be a pretty good meeting, isn't it? So that's that's a sort of quite trivial and mundane example, but I'm just wanting to show you the practical application of all of this. The second area of resource, and there are 10, so I better keep moving through them, or the 10 that I've listed today. The second area is all of those people who've ever seen you and said yes to you and believed in you or got you or cared about you or loved you. And they could be, your really good friends who really believe in the potential of your life, or your teachers, or those people who really care about you. Or it could have been one interaction with a school teacher who once said something to you that made a difference. Or a kid in your childhood, you were playing in the gym with that kid in your childhood, and there was something that happened that empowered you. So every time we've had an experience where we've interacted with someone that empowers us, that helps us believe in ourselves, that helps us feel valuable, or loved or cared for, all of those is the second class of resources. And some people, and including myself, I call it the circle of support. And a lot during these meditations, I'll have people develop a really strong circle of support, to have around you half a dozen, start with half a dozen people who believe in you, and then have a second circle around them, and then a third circle. In the end, maybe you'll have a whole football field of people standing around you. Every person who's ever felt gratitude towards you because you've made a difference, or who's ever cared about you, that's a lot of people. It doesn't have to be someone who's loved you for your whole life. They might have loved you for 5 minutes. That's enough, or cared about you, or believed in you for 5 minutes, or you made a difference to them. So, it just depends on the order that you want to go in. But somebody said to me the other day, well, the thing is that, I don't really remember people who loved me or cared about me, or, you know, who believed in me. And this particular person had a childhood which was very unsupported, she was very unseen, very unloved, very unsupported. And it's difficult for her to believe in those qualities from other people. And what she uses is what I might call mundane or worldly archetypal figures. You know, the image of, you know, the medicine woman, or a character from, you know, Galadriel from Lord of the Rings, or, you know, Gandalf, or, you know, a character from a storybook, or, you know, your favorite, you know, Sherlock Holmes, you know, or a warrior, some sort of warrior. In China, you know, when I go through in China and I'm doing it in Chinese meditations, and I say, you know, and it could be Lao Tzu, and it could be the Buddha, and it could be Mao Zedong, you know, you can choose your own archetypal figures. Although actually those are spiritual archetypal figures that I'll come to more in a moment. But any character from, you know, a book or a movie or a story that touches your soul, that carries a particular quality, can be used as a resource. You know, if you want, you know, if I want to feel like a warrior, I can imagine the founder of Aikido blessing me, and that I'm a part of his lineage, and that I can just be this great, you know, Aikido warrior. So I think those sorts of sort of images, you know, Mother Earth being present for me. Or I've got a friend, one of my mentors is 5 years old. His name is Teddy. And he gave me some protectors. You know, they're rather like Tibetan Buddhist spiritual protectors, except that he gave me 3 plastic dinosaurs. And I should have, you know, I feel like I should have those on my shrine, because if I ever need protection, I've got, you know, T-Rex to protect me. So I can call on the archetypal power of T-Rex as a protector, that sort of fierceness. You know, there might be some animal that represents the fierceness that you need in a particular situation. So that's sort of archetypal resources. And then there's, of course, your strengths and your talents, which perhaps, you know, goes more closely with the first category, which is, you know, looking at your life so far. Have you identified? You ought to have. It's really important. If you want to be successful, it's really an important thing to do. Identify what your strengths and talents are. And you can do that through doing psychometric tests. You can do that by just sitting with a piece of paper and saying, what are my strengths and talents? You can do that by interviewing people and saying, tell me, what do you think my strengths and talents are? But really having a good sense of that, because if you can make a list of your strengths and, you know, your strengths, then you can hold a strength in mind, for example, empathy, if that's a strength you have. And then you can let your conscious and unconscious search back through time to find lots of examples of when you were empathic, and you can collect the feeling of all of that up, and then you can apply it to the current situation. And of course, when you see a time you were empathic, when you hear it, when you feel it, it stimulates those circuits in your nervous system, so that those circuits in your nervous systems are stimulated by a historic memory that is now available to you now because you've seen it, heard it, and felt it. There's a famous story of, and I can't think of his name now, but someone an American soldier, a pilot actually, who was held by the Viet Cong for 5 years, and he was rescued, and they put a big parade on for him. And they were driving to the parade, you know, after he really was tortured badly, and he was kept in a pit in the ground. It was, you know, a terrible experience. And as they were going to the parade, he saw a golf course, and he said, oh, I just really want to play a quick round. And in America, they really make their soldiers heroes, so veterans heroes. So they went into the golf course and said, he's a vet, he's just come back from Vietnam, can he play on your course? And the guy was playing, you know, at a top level, despite the fact he'd been in the jungle all those years in a prison camp. And then they said to him, you know, how come after all these years you haven't played for 5 years? How come it was so good? He said, because every day I rehearsed in my mind's eye. I imagined myself. One of the ways I survived was just by imagining myself playing golf all the time. So you rehearse it in your mind, it activates the feeling in your body. So knowing your strengths is having a label for your different strength is a great way of accessing those practical resources that you can apply in the current situation. So let's go out a little bit further. We've been talking quite a lot about ourselves, and we've been talking about people who believe in us and sponsor us. But we could also talk about your ancestors. So I haven't actually done that much. My ancestors are all rather difficult, had rather a difficult time, but actually it would be really a good thing. And something I'm going to do is spend more time exploring what are the resources that the different branches of my family have, different characters in my family, and what were they doing? What did that look like? What did that sound like? What did that feel like? Let me have some of what they're having. Let me sort of breathe into myself some of the qualities that are in my genetic line, the positive qualities in my genetic line. So I think that's a very, very fruitful area. And of course, each of that ties into our cultures. Now, whatever ethnic group you're from and whatever culture you're from, there are some great things in that culture or ethnic group and in your ancestry. So the question is, what is it that's really stands out for you that you can draw on in your lineage and from your culture? So of course, all of that is potential resources. But actually, we are all a part of the community of mind, the global community of mind. And anything that anyone's done anywhere that we can read about, hear about, watch on television, or be told about, we can imagine, and we can have some of that. So one of the people that that is one of my mentors for dogged persistence and staying with his vision is Nelson Mandela. I mean, actually, he had some, he had Western education, so we have something in common there. But, his cultural background, Zulu, is not something that I'm familiar with. But just the idea in my mind's eye of him going through his court case in a very noble way, getting sent to prison for 27 years, deciding he wanted to understand the Afrikaner mind better, making friends with his prison guards so he could understand the Afrikaner mind. All of that led to him being president of South Africa. So, that's sort of that I can use that resource from the global community of mind as a resource for myself. So just thinking about that, isn't there a lot of resources that's available to each of us? We need to get really creative. We need to really enjoy our meditation processes and let our minds wander all over the place, collecting up interesting experiences that we can then use. And then of course, let's talk about nature. Going with the global community of mind, we can go one level further, we can go to nature. What would the ocean say about your situation? What would a stream do if it came across a big rock that was an obstacle? So can you draw from nature resources that will support you in what it is that you have to do in your life? I often use the cycle of the seasons, and so do hypnotherapists and Erickson and people doing guided meditations all the way back. You can say to someone, you can say to yourself, this is really a hard time. It's like winter. I've lost all my leaves when I got fired from the business, when I got made redundant. All the leaves fell from my tree. And here I am in the cold of winter, but actually I'm sucking up sap from the ground and I'm preparing for spring. And even though people, when they look at me, can't see what the preparation that's going on at a deep level, yeah, I'm taking up sap and preparing myself for spring. And in the few weeks before spring, I'm really getting busy on the inside, but people on the outside can't see it yet until one day the first green shoot bud comes. And then of course from spring, we blossom into summer. And then at some point at the end of summer, we need to do a sort of house clearing exercise. We need to do a simplification exercise. So we then need to drop the leaves from the tree again and go through the cycle one more time. So we can use that resource of the seasons. There are many, many, resources we can use from nature. Have you seen a photograph of a chute coming through a concrete, road, or something growing out of a wall? There are so many positive metaphors that we can get from nature. So that's another whole area of resources. I've mentioned spiritual archetypes, but I'll just mention them again briefly. So every saint, every figure from any tradition, all the different traditions, and formal traditions and informal traditions are available to you should you want to connect with them. And rather than, you can follow the tradition in its formal way, but I personally like to just imagine these spiritual figures floating around, hanging out with each other around me. So I'm not going to go into what I do, but I have people from different traditions all hanging out together, having a great time with each other, sending me blessings. It's like, why have the archetypes of one tradition when I can have the archetypes from half a dozen? So, but really the real thing is, what archetypal forms from spiritual traditions speak to your heart? And how do you feel the blessings from them? How do you talk to them? How do you pray to them? How do you feel the blessings from them? How do you engage with them? How do you have conversation with them? And of course, that's a big topic, but just praying to higher power. And if you're such a scientist that you don't want to go anywhere near spiritual traditions, for me, there is nothing more spiritual than looking at the night sky and thinking of the scale of the universe, or thinking back to the Big Bang and how the universe got created. That really gets me, excited. And I just want to mention one more area briefly, which is, of course, there's the non-dual mystical traditions. Every spiritual tradition has non-dual mystical, and where you are one with. So all the times, there may have been moments in your life when you just felt one with the universe, when you were looking in a newborn's eyes, or when you were out in nature perhaps, and you came across a moment of the sacred unfolding. Something was happening that really helped you get your sense of your place in the sacredness, the beauty, the magnificence of it all. And we've all had those experiences, I believe, whether or not you remember them. So that's about 10 different areas of resource. So some of you are very experienced with resource type of meditations, and others of you are less experienced with resource meditations. But one of the reasons for providing such a big list is because maybe there's some areas of resource that you haven't accessed so far. If you haven't done much of this stuff before, I would go for, yes, Suzanne, I will share the list in the chat. In fact, what I'll do is I'll share the slide deck in the chat at the end of, I won't do it now because then you'll all be looking at it, and that's not what I want you to be doing now, but I will do it at the end of the session, especially if someone reminds me at the end of the session, and I'll put it into the newsletter at the end of the week. If you're starting out, use experiences from your life when you've been really successful and in the flow, or people who believe in you, see you, get you, care about you. But use anything you want. You open up your mind when you're doing the meditation. Say, what resources do I need right now? And then say, I wonder what will come. If you say to the unconscious mind, I need resources to deal with this, I wonder what will come. Guess what's going to happen? Something's going to come. And if you do it that way, if you screw your cognitive mind up and you sort of say, okay, I've got to think of a resource and it's got to be like this. So I'll pick Joe Bloggs, who was my first boss. Well, that's quite predicted and logical. But if and it's great to do that, by the way, that can be great. I'm not against that, but it can be really interesting to say unconscious mind or body mind, bring me a resource that will really help me in the situation. Then suddenly you've got, the little girl in the schoolyard who gave you her toy, or whatever, something will come that you would never have thought of when you ask the unconscious mind to do that. So So I'm just doing the generative state myself. I'm just connecting in myself. The reason I'm connecting in myself is because I've sort of got to the end of that presentation. And I'm also aware of the noise outside my window. I don't know if you can hear it. So having connected with myself, I've got the intention of, you know, having a great meditation with you folks. And so therefore I'm going to stand up and I'm going to shut the window. It's one of the wonderful things about the street that I'm in at the moment, which is that there are people with hedges outside and they're trimming their hedges. So that in a way was a tiny example of me checking in with myself at a body-mind level. Just checking, centering myself, feeling myself, wondering what was best to do in the situation, applying a resource which was telling you what I was going to do, and then going and doing it. And we can do that 100 times a day with your generative states. You know, learn a ritual that takes you into a body-mind connected state, and then keep deepening that ritual. And it doesn't really matter what ritual you use. There are lots of different potential rituals. When I say ritual, I just mean procedure, a process. So one of the ones I use is see four things, hear four things, feel four things. See three things, hear three things, feel three things. See two things, hear two things, feel two things. See one thing, hear one thing, feel one thing. Or, you know, that would be great. Or you might just feel the sky above your head and the earth beneath your feet, and the connection between the two. Or you might use your breathing to just take you deep down into your body. Or you might have some spiritual practice that takes you into a deeply connected place with yourself. And it can be great to just feel your belly. That really makes sure that the meditation is not just visual and auditory, but it's embodied, it's in the body. So we can talk about embodied awareness practice. And that's why breathing meditation can be good, because as you breathe in, I can feel it feels like the breath is going right down into my lower belly. It's not actually, but there's a pressure, isn't there? There's an energy movement down into my lower belly. And people with a science background don't like the idea of chakras, but actually there are energy places where we have more feeling in our bodies than others. You have to admit that. And they're down the central line of your body. So I can feel things behind my navel. I can feel the energy in my lower belly. I can feel the energy in my heart. It's quite interesting. Some people love to just center and ground themselves into their lower belly, drop their hips as you would in a martial art. And other people like to just find the still point in their chest, a place that loves, but it's also it can be very still. And other people enjoy doing both. And I wonder what it is that you enjoy doing. And so the basic thing is that you just take a few breaths and you pay attention to anything other than your rational mind. There's nothing wrong with the rational mind, with the inner voice, with internal dialogue, except that it takes up too much space. It takes up too much time. We're much, much more than our internal dialogue. We're much, much more than our cognitive mind. And so taking our attention elsewhere helps us to get into this more body-mind connected state, body, emotion, mind, spirit connected state. And the education system tends to have us focus on our intellect, yet to be human, we're physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And so we broaden out, and that's why doing a body meditation is great. Feeling your feet, feeling your calves, feeling your thighs. Feeling your breath. Paying attention to muscles that you don't normally pay attention to. What about your wings, your shoulder blades, your neck? You can simply say to yourself, I want to go deeper and I want to go broader. Broadening means that I can hear my computer, hear stillness in the room. I can hear sounds outside the window. Broadening is just being aware of everything in the universe, everything that's here. I can imagine it with my eyes closed. I can see the whole of existence with my eyes closed. And I can hear it with my ears. That's why I love to listen to birds outside the window, if they're there. Because my consciousness is then outside the window. So notice what takes you deeper, what you do that takes you deeper. One really useful thing is pay attention, listen to your internal dialogue as if it was someone talking to you in the same room as you, but not you. Listen to it from a few feet away. Like someone at a party or a networking meeting who's talking to you. Be curious about it. Be polite, be respectful, be compassionate. But it's just one of the things in your experience. It's just a radio station in your head. So learning not to identify with it, but just to watch it. I discovered a new meditation process the other day, run by, I think, Christian mystics. And they say, as you watch, imagine you're sitting by a river. And every thought you have, put it in a little boat and send it down the river. So it's like you're not holding on to it, you're not following it. You're sitting on the bank of the flow of life, and you're putting any thoughts that come, just welcoming them and putting them into a boat so they flow away. It's really a lovely thing to do, to just watch thoughts arising. They stay a little time. Just if you avoid clinging onto it, but you just let them go, and they go off, and then something else arises. It's really great and enjoyable to watch everything that arises moment by moment. There's thoughts, there's feelings. Feelings change moment by moment. For example, the feeling of your breathing. Sound changes. So now let's just start to enjoy psychological resources that could come to mind. I rather imagine this sometimes as it's a warm summer's night and we're sitting by a campfire of consciousness. And we can just invite resources to come to mind, and then they appear out of the gloom into consciousness. Let's start with memories of times when you were successful, things were going well, or a memory when you were happy or in the flow. And for some people that will come as an image, and then the sounds will come, and then the feeling. But for other people, perhaps the sounds come first or the feelings. So just notice how it comes to you. And some people see a lot, some people hear a lot, some people feel a lot. So just notice how it happens for you. It's great if we can have a little bit of both. So if you're thinking of a time when you were happy or in the flow or successful, is there a video? Is there a soundtrack? Is there a feeling? Enjoy that. And I find it helpful to imagine my belly's like a basket. So every one of these memories that I experience, I put the feeling like a piece of delicious fruit into the basket of my belly and collecting up these feelings. And so you may find that the way you process, you've got one memory with soundtrack and feelings. And other people may have more than one memory with soundtrack and feelings. And it doesn't really matter as long as you follow your own process. All you need to do is to allow this to unfold the way that it unfolds for you. So collecting up the feeling and enjoying it. And of course, you can imagine how many experiences of flow and happiness and doing something well, making a great cake you've had in your life. It can be small things like making a nice meal or doing some creative project or being kind to someone or explaining something to someone. It doesn't just have to be big events of happiness or success. It could just be waking in the morning and saying, oh, today I'm feeling good today. So those are possibilities for you, all the memories of things going well, of being in the flow. We could also see if anyone comes to mind when we think of people who have sponsored us or seen us, really got us, or believed in us, cared about us. And it's also interesting to note if someone like this comes, whether they're someone you know really well or not very well, or someone you only met once. Whether they're from the present or the past, or the distant past, or even from the future. Just noticing who comes, welcoming them. And it's great to, if you can, see their face, hear what they might say to you, and feel how that feels, and collect up the feeling and put this in the basket of your belly, or wherever you want, but collect up the feeling. It could be a mentor or a teacher or a friend or someone in a shop on the street who you talk to and they feel touched by you. And of course, we could spend a lot more time thinking about other people who we've touched and who have seen us to some degree and cared about us to some degree. We're going to keep moving. We're going to think about figures, people that we've never met, storybook figures. Who's your favorite childhood storybook? Is Winnie the Pooh one of your mentors? Or Spider-Man, or Catwoman, or the hero of one of your childhood books? Someone who knows how to love, or knows how to adventure, or is a warrior, or is playful, or creative. I just had the image of, wow, wouldn't it be great to have Pablo Picasso as one of my internal resources? I can explore that and play with that a little. Or someone that you're interested in but have never met. Milton, Erickson, or Gregory Bateson. And then let's go to your ancestors. Now, if you come from a difficult family like me, I've slightly avoided thinking about my ancestors. But if I wanted, there are some great warriors within my family. My grandmother was a connoisseur of art. There was a very empowered feminist woman in the 1890s who was a journalist. Perhaps there are figures in your past, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, or even long before that, who might have something to offer you. Or something in your culture, your native culture. Of course, many people here have several cultures, the culture of birth and other cultures where you've connected deeply. But wonder about your culture of birth. What are the qualities, the positive qualities of your culture of birth? Could you use more of those resources? Because they will have been around. You've imbued them. Of course, we need to make a distinction between the stuff that's not so good from our cultures and the stuff that's good from our cultures. But let's right now take something, a quality from our culture that's great and could be a resource to us. Add that to the basket in our belly. And by the way, if you're following my words precisely, that's great. And if you're just allowing my words to drift in one ear and around and down in a vague sort of way, that's great too. However you're experiencing this. And even if you've fallen into a deep meditation state and are hardly hearing me at all, you're still taking in what it is that we're talking about. You're still processing. My voice is simply here to encourage your own unconscious, your own body-mind, because it's your own body-mind that provides you with the resources. And so in addition to your culture, the great thing about the internet and communication in the modern world and having so much information available to us about all the different cultures of the world is that we can go to any culture that we've had contact with and find a resource. The global community of mind. If you need Albert Einstein, he's there. If you need Native American who's so close to the land, she's there, he's there. If you need someone who's doing simple but deep, profound child rearing practices in the Amazon rainforest, they're there. Anything that you can think about is potentially a resource for you. And so it's great to wonder about the world community and wonder what resources it would be great for you to have more of. And not to do anything about it necessarily. You can just wonder about it with your conscious mind, while your unconscious mind can have the wisdom to give you some of that, if it's really the right thing for you. There's nothing for you to do except to listen to the ideas and notice what comes up, what you connect with. And nature. What do you need right now? Do you need the feeling of a bolt of lightning? Or do you need the feeling of a stream that gradually carves its way out through the landscape? Or a drop of water that joins the ocean? Or a pebble that's worn by the waves on the seashore? Or the blossoming of a flower, or the steadfastness of an old tree? Or a bird, or an animal? Or the broad view of the sky? Or the feeling solidity, groundedness, consistency of the earth? And just because I haven't mentioned them so far, if there's any spiritual figure that you have a connection with, or didn't know that you have a connection with, that wants to arrive and say hi. I always think that the spiritual figures are humble. The wiser you are, the humbler you are. So someone might just come and say hi in a very chatty way, or beaming love, or stillness. And that reminds you, or might remind you, or could remind you of a moment in your life when you really felt at peace with everything. We spend so much time on the journey of our lives, but sometimes we stop, and then we've arrived. And just spend a few minutes now allowing yourself to just enjoy the collection of resources that has come to mind, whether it's come to mind in a conscious way, or whether it's come to mind more as a sort of feeling. It's more of a feeling in your body. You might be feeling something deep, but not be very clear about all the fruit you've collected in your basket. And just enjoy the process of feeling this and enjoying this and wondering about how you might continue to collect more resources, more fruit from all these different areas during the days, weeks, months that come. how might you continue to pick more fruit from all of these areas during the days, weeks, and months that come. Sometimes going to one field to pick one type of resource, sometimes going to another, sometimes deciding that you want to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So many different possible recipes, collecting the different fruit and blending them together in many different ways. Theoretically, there's infinite possibility in the combination of different ways that you could combine the resources. And probably it would take a whole lifetime to remember every resource that was ever available to you. Perhaps it would take more than a lifetime. But every day, every week, during our waking dreams, but also during our sleeping dreams, we can collect a few more resources and add them to the basket of our minds, or the museum of our minds, or the shop window of our minds. And when you're ready, just gradually reorientate yourself to the screen and to the group environment. And we're going to go into groups of 3 and 4. And the question is, how was this meditation for you? What were the resources that came to mind? And how might you deepen this in the future? How was the meditation for you? What were the resources that came to mind? And how might you develop the meditation? How might you develop these resources in the future? There are groups of 3 and 4. The groups of 3 get 10 minutes per person and will do your own timing. The groups of 3 will do their own timing. I will do the timing for the groups of 4. We have 30 minutes starting now, and you can join your group now. Great, she's back. Yes. Great, good. So this meeting is now being recorded. Questions, comments, how was the exercise for you? As usual, I forgot, we're coming out of the meditation. I don't want to talk too much, but just remember for future sessions, one person talks, the other people listen, and they can say, tell me more, and they can ask, but you're not coaching, you're not giving people advice, you're not any of those things. And if, except for the last minute, if you really have an idea for someone, you can say, oh, can I make a suggestion? But it really should be the last minute. But really, most of it is just you listening to the person talking, person-centered counseling. So I always forget, I often forget to mention that until afterwards. So do remember it for next time. Any questions or comments? How was it for you? How was it for you? Yeah, if you you unmute and speak, would be great.
It was really needed to begin with for the day, and the thoughts, the memories, the ideas, the people, the faces, the experiences and journeys that just floated in and out were just so beautiful, warm, loving, and inspiring and grounding at the same time. So it's like an observer of a life journey that's happening, and that was really needed for the day. Thank you very much, Julian.
Thank you for inspiring us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I really liked my mind being involved in all my relationships, which seem to be getting better since I've retired. And I was very much aware of my family and my grandparents and all sorts of wonderful experiences I've had with friends and family over the years. And then me very much wanting to connect with my niece again, who lives in Switzerland. And so I'm contemplating whether to go to Switzerland then Greece.
Wonderful, great.
Which is all a bit bonkers.
Perfect.
All a bit bonkers, but that's me anyway.
Yeah, no, that sounds it's not bonkers at all. It sounds great, you know. So really, you know, one way of talking about what Katie is talking about is, you know, is your glass of water half empty or half full? Let's spend a lot of time in the psychological resource part of this process. Let's spend a lot of time paying attention to the glass of water half full, all the great things, all the things that we're grateful for. Thank you, Katie. There was someone who had their hand up. Who was that? It was Karina. Great.
I just wanted to say thank you for you, because all those different resources, I really found them very helpful, especially with the nature. Some childhood memories came up. I never expected them. And also with the nature, it was like in rough times, if I see nature and feel connected, nature is always itself. It just goes at pace. And I thought that gave me a different perspective. And at the end, I really could embody it from my heart. There was something from my heart to my belly. And I just want to say thank you to your work, Julian. Also, the last time when we went through resources, it was about somebody who loved me, and I never expected anything. And then all of a sudden, my family came up that actually I was wanted. Even if it was hard with my family, but that made really a major shift for me. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Great. Beautiful.
That you're offering, that you're so generous. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Talking about nature, I mean, there is so much research, and I'm going to write about it actually. I mean, really just summarizing the research, but there's so much medical research about, you know, how spending time in nature affects your mood, affects your immune system, affects this, affects that. It really, I think it's one of we've separated so many people live in cities. We've separated ourselves from nature. We need to reconnect again with the resource of nature, not just in our mind's eye and in our noses, but also in reality as well, you know, in our mind's eye, in our ears and our noses. It's just such an important thing. Get into nature every day if you possibly can, even if that means going into a small garden. So that's great. Who wants to go next? Thank you. Who wants to go next? I can't see your hands waving. You can just speak up if you want to. So Laura, great. Tell us, what's your question or what's your comment? Laura, perhaps you're muted. You need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. At one point, I had the feeling that the word resource was quite profane in comparison with what I was experiencing. And I said, I wonder, is there another word that we can use? I know they are resources, but when we say, yes, nature is a resource, I have this feeling it's much, much, much more than that.
Absolutely.
So I know this is the word we're using, of course, but I'm trying to find another word.
Could it be treasures? Could it be treasures? Riches?
Treasures is a good word.
Treasures?
Yeah. It's a terrible thing, isn't it, Laura? You know, we just like, you know, we've got all these ecological problems. We've got the climate crisis. We've got the biodiversity crisis. And here I am suggesting that we exploit the resources of nature, even if it's really psychological.
It's when we say human resources. Well, we are not resources, but I understand that this is the word that we are using for what we are doing. But
no, treasures. I think treasures. I mean, there are probably other words as well.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing because if you want to be credible as a psychologist, you use all these psychological words, and then people think you're credible. You know, and psychotherapy in particular, and the psychological movement that is about us learning about our own psychology and being better at managing our own psychology. We've had to, you know, psychology used to be medical and scientific. We need to take it back into the human realm, but we've still got some of the language of science and medicine. But it's a difficult one. I've been very, very careful over the years about how to introduce spirituality, because it used to be that it would lose credibility because you're talking about it. And so, but I think there's such a pressing urge now to find ourselves, to feel connected with our biosphere, that we are a part of if we exploit the biosphere, we exploit ourselves. We are intrinsic to it. Every breath we take, all the water we drink, every bite of food tells us we're completely dependent on this biosphere. We're a part of it, and we can't exploit it. So, those words, are not, in some ways, are not good words, but they're words that people understand. Maybe I'll try using treasures. Imagine another treasure coming to mind. I think that'd be great. I'll try that next week.
And if we go deeper into that, we don't even connect with nature. We don't connect with Mother Earth, Gaia, Pachamama. The Indians in Colombia, the Arhuaco Indians in Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, they say, my body is the earth and the earth is my body. And the metaphor, for us, it's a metaphor, but for them, it's literal.
Yeah.
We are the same thing. We don't even connect. And you were saying, yes, we live in cities, and for us, that's foreign. But we are nature.
Yes, we are. I think it's useful. I think that there are two forms of spirituality. There's spirituality when I imagine the spiritual power as separate to myself, and I build a relationship with it and I communicate with it. And I think it's fine to imagine Mother Earth, or talk to a tree, or talk to a river, or talk to an ocean. That's a great practice. But the deeper level is the non-dual level, where you are, I am. Is there a single cell in your, tell me, put your hand up if there's a single cell in your body that's not nature. Even the skyscrapers are nature. Where did all that concrete come from? It's all nature. So there is a step for people around saying, I must connect back to the biosphere, to the natural world, to the system. But yet there's still a separation between me and the system when I use that language. And yet I can't, it's hard for most people to jump from being a Western educated individual back to being somebody who lives, they live inside, they're a part of, they live inside, they are nature. Maybe there are some steps between the two, but yeah, I completely agree with you. I totally agree with everything you're saying. It's like it's hard to jump from a sense of spirituality to the mystical union. The mystical union is, you've never been separate from God in the first place. You've never been separate from Buddha mind. Buddha nature is your nature.
Yeah.
You've never been away from the ocean of existence. You've never been away from the, but that's a hard place to start for many people. So, yeah. But I really agree. If we stop thinking about ourselves as separate from nature, we just say we are nature, and how. But you see, I find it helpful if we take the image of mother, that the earth is our mother, and she feeds us, but we better not abuse her. That's quite a good starting point, for people. And then you say, well, I am the mother. But that's a more mystical level, isn't it? Great point, Laura. Really beautiful. Are you a shaman yourself, or are you what's your work in this area?
Well, I like shamanism a lot. Yeah, I'm not a shaman, myself, but I like studying and learning, and I'm visiting places. Yeah.
So here's the recommendation to everybody on this call, which is that spend some time in a forest or by a stream or by the ocean or a lake or a mountaintop and just melt into it so that you just are it. You know, the first step is to feel a part of it, and then you melt one level further, and then you just are it. And then just have, even if you only have that for, you know, that feeling for a couple of minutes, that could be life-changing. So a real recommendation, just immerse yourself so much that you slip from being separate to being one with it all. Great invitation. Everybody unmute yourself, please. So as you know, many of you know, my ritual is that at the end of these calls, I like to hear everybody's voice. And so it's slightly chaotic, but one after another, we can all just say, you know, how are you feeling right now? And if someone speaks over you, or you speak at the same time as someone, just repeat yourself when there's a gap. So let's hear, how are you right now?
Touched.
Brilliant.
Right.
Excited.
Like
Anticipatory.
Great.
Relieved.
Enlightened.
Great.
Looking forward.
great.
Nurtured.
Deepening.
Blissful.
Connecting.
Resources.
Blessed.
Grateful.
Mhm.
Feeling enriched.
Grateful. Happy to be with all.
Connected.
Yes, connected. Connected. Supported.
Nurtured.
Nurtured.
Comfortable.
Excited.
Hopeful.
Resourceful.
Hopeful.
So much so.
Warm-hearted.
Wholehearted. Nice. Wholesome.
Wholesome.
Connected.
Emerging.
Whole.
Whole.
Healthy.
Positive.
Positive.
In a range of resources. Hopeful.
Blessings.
Wealthy.
Healthy. Alive.
Alive.
See you all next week, hopefully. Lovely
Bye.
to have
Thank you,
here.
Julian.
Thank you.